So now we're going to talk about Bikram yoga, which is the most popular or widespread form of hot yoga throughout the country and the world. So anytime you see yoga that's coined hot yoga or Bikram yoga, it means that that studio is part of Bikram's College of India network. So he sort of owns all these chains. So you get a very consistent experience throughout. So this is not to be confused with many vinyasa studios, or I say normal yoga studios, not Bikram stamped hot yoga studios, normal yoga studios. Some of them also offer hot yoga classes too. This is completely different. That's vinyasa yoga, like the styles we've been talking about so far, just with heat. Gyms often do this, right? It's just yoga in a hot room. That's not Bikram hot yoga, which is the same series of 26 postures for 90 minutes with Bikram's, official style. This is also important to know because if you go to a Bikram yoga studio, you will not find any other offerings. You will just find Bikram hot yoga. Well, if you go to a normal yoga studio, they might have tons of different kinds of yoga classes, including maybe, their version of a hot yoga vinyasa or power vinyasa class. So Bikram yoga has its own style and philosophy. It was founded in the 1970s by Bikram Choudhury. He's kind of a controversial character in the yoga world. He's very, very wealthy, based on, the amount of studios he has. And basically, it's also a form of hatha yoga. But the difference is, so in a normal yoga class, you do tons of different yoga poses and, different teachers change it up. There's so many different styles. Not with Bikram. With Bikram, it's always the exact same sequence, to the extent that Bikram teachers actually all read from the exact same script. So if you go to a Bikram class in Boston and one in Miami, they're going to be almost pretty much identical in terms of what the teacher is saying and in terms of what you will do. So again, 90 minutes, 26 postures, 2 breathing exercises, and the room is 105 degrees with 40% humidity. So this is Bikram hot yoga, and people who love it, and it's wonderful. So let's talk about some of the big factors here. The biggest being the heat. So doing yoga in heat like this takes a couple classes to get used to. Another thing to know is that when you do Bikram yoga, they don't allow you to leave the room once you come into the yoga studio. You're supposed to stay. So even if you have to go to the bathroom, you can't. You're supposed to stay in the room. And it's really hot. And you might not want to do the postures, in which case they just tell you to sit. But sitting in the heat is pretty much just as bad, if not worse. So, this is just something to be aware of. People doing it for the first time, they get dizzy, they get nauseous. Your body's just not used to that kind of heat, especially exercising in that kind of heat. So this is something you just really want to be aware of if you're going into a hot yoga class. The rules are kind of strict, and, it's normal to feel dizzy. It's normal to feel nauseous your first couple classes while your body adjusts to sort of doing a workout in a sauna. Besides the heat, the next big differentiator between Bikram yoga and other styles is this focus on what he calls extension and compression. So a lot of Bikram yoga is about cutting off circulation to a certain limb or part of the body or organ, and then holding the posture for a certain amount of time. And then when you release, new blood, new oxygen goes to that organ or limb and rejuvenates it. So there's this constant extension, compression that he plays with, and it's very brilliant the way he's designed this sequence that you do over and over again is really about bringing fresh oxygenated blood to the body, and it's one of the reasons like Bikram yoga feels great. The extension and compression is like a squeeze and soak analogy, giving these deep twists to the internal organs. So the 2 breathing exercises in Bikram yoga, which start and end each class, are designed to expand your lung capacity and bring fresh oxygen to your whole body and to your lungs. So Bikram was a big believer that we're only actually using a very small percentage of our lungs, and so everything about his breathing exercises and the rest of the class is really designed to expand your lung capacity, which is a great thing. Like in all yoga, in Bikram yoga, you always want to breathe in and out of your nose, except for the specific exercises. He has some that involve breathing out of your mouth. But during the actual class, you always want to breathe in and out of your nose. So one of the great things about Bikram yoga is that it really gets you doing the breathing and doing the breathing properly. So in, normal, what I call normal, not hot yoga classes, they always talk about the breath and the importance of the breath, and you try to breathe the best you can. But in Bikram, you really have to breathe effectively and really do the breathing, the ujjayi breathing, because it's so hot, and if you don't, you really risk passing out. So it's sort of an extreme way to learn a lesson, but one of my favorite things about Bikram, and having done Bikram for however long I was doing it, I think a year and a half, is that it really got me paying attention to the breath, because in Bikram, in normal yoga, if you don't do the breath, it's not great. But in Bikram, if you don't do the proper breathing, like you die, or you feel like you might die. So one thing that's really great is, Bikram getting you to really focus on your breathing, and it becomes very much a mental exercise when you're dealing with that much heat. And that's something that even if you stop doing Bikram yoga like me, you can take with you. And it really teaches you the importance of the breath in sort of an extreme but, important and beneficial way. So I've mentioned that the sequence that you do in Bikram yoga is always the same. It's always the same 26 postures. Another thing to know is that you do each of these postures, almost all of them, 2 times. The first is usually you hold the pose for 30 seconds, and the second is usually you hold the pose for a minute, although that can vary slightly. So this is another nice thing about Bikram, is that it's kind of great for beginners, because you do the same poses each time, which allows you as a beginner to sort of know what's coming, and do the same thing over and over again. And just doing every pose twice in a row the way he's designed it is really nice, because when you do it the second time, you can adjust and correct things. And in a normal vinyasa flow class, you never really know what you're going to get. Often you don't do the same posture more than once. So that's something to be aware of in Bikram, is that all these 26 poses, you do them each twice and you hold them. It's pretty challenging. The next big difference between normal, non-hot yoga and what's so special about Bikram yoga is the mirror. This is something people usually don't talk a lot about, but Bikram is one of the few styles of yoga that always has a mirror in the room. You'll notice most other yoga styles and studios don't have mirrors. Some do, but most don't. Bikram, the mirror is really important. A lot of the cues in the class encourage you to focus in on your own eyes and really look at the mirror. This is also good if you're a beginner, because if you're new to yoga or any form of exercise, really, you're not that aware spatially of where you are and what you're doing. And other forms of yoga have that focus be very inward, closing your eyes or really focusing inside. And Bikram, it's really about looking in the mirror. So it's just a different way of approaching it. And again, it can be great for beginners because you can look in the mirror and literally see what you're doing wrong. I highly suggest looking at other people in a Bikram class. You'll always see there are the devotional Bikram people who are always in the front row. And it's really helpful because you can see how they're doing it and adjust yourself accordingly. So, the use of the mirror, and the mirror as really a learning tool, is something that's special about Bikram. So Bikram yoga is great for people who really want to sweat and very intensely and immediately feel the effects of each pose. You definitely want to bring water to a Bikram class. They give you specific instructions at certain periods in the class between certain postures in which you're allowed to drink the water that they suggest you drink. But bringing water is necessary for Bikram. It's not necessary for other styles of yoga. It's mandatory for Bikram. You need water. Most studios also have it for sale. You also need towels. And this can be confusing, but basically when you do a Bikram class, you put your mat down, or your rental mat, and then you put a towel completely covering the mat. So most Bikram studios give you 2 towels. What I always used to do was use one to cover my mat. I'd bring my own washcloth or hand cloth to wipe sweat off my hands, You don't want to be slippery. And then I'd use the second towel to shower afterwards to dry off. So another thing to be aware of. Again, most Bikram studios have towels, or they give you two, and you can, rent more for $1 or something with every class. And, with Bikram, because it's so hot, a lot of people wear very minimal clothing, so tiny shorts or just a sports bra. So that's really personal preference. So just be aware, if you're going to a hot yoga class, you might want to not wear a long sleeve shirt and, really hot leggings. That being said, I actually prefer to wear leggings and not shorts in Bikram classes because you sweat a lot, and what I found is, again, I have a huge fear of slipping or anything being slippery and getting injured, and if you're wearing tight leggings, they just absorb the sweat, while if you're wearing shorts, the sweat is obviously dripping everywhere and all over your legs and then all over your mat. So a little counterintuitive, but just something to be aware of. Bikram studios pretty much always have showers. I've yet to find one that doesn't. They know you're sweating. So be aware of that. You're going to want to bring, some have shampoo and soap and stuff, but a lot don't. So you're going to want to bring whatever shower stuff you want to use. Not a lot, because usually there's not a lot of showers and everyone wants to use them. So you kind of need to shower quickly. So it's probably not like a shampoo, conditioner, put curlers in situation, but just bring whatever you need for a quick rinse off or a quick shower. And definitely always bring a plastic bag to put your sopping, sweaty clothes in. These are things you just have to kind of prepare. It's like some extra stuff to bring if you're doing hot yoga. So many people love Bikram yoga and they say it's a miracle. They say it's helped them overcome cancer, addictions, stress, that it's just a miracle sequence, and they do it 7 days a week, and that's great. Critics of Bikram say that it's dogmatic. It's definitely very different in terms of the language it uses for yoga, and critics also say that it just can't be good to do the same 26 postures 7 days a week for years and years, that you just need more variety. So those are sort of the two sides. For me, Bikram yoga was very much like a gateway yoga for me. And I think if you're new to yoga and you're a hardcore exercise person, that you like to sweat, you like to track goals, you're a runner, things like that, Bikram yoga is great because you definitely sweat. Because the postures are the same and you can see what you're doing in the mirror, you can really track your progress. So if you're kind of like that type A hardcore personality, you really want to work out, Bikram yoga is perfect for you, and you'll find so much joy in it. I did. And, I eventually moved on to other forms of yoga that were much, not as hot and not as intense and gentler. But I really feel like I couldn't have got there without doing Bikram first, because when I first started my journey, I was still very much like that go type A type of exercise person who needed to sweat, who needed to do the same thing and be able to track how I was improving. And Bikram yoga is perfect for that. So that's, I think, sort of the people who should do it. You definitely don't want to do Bikram yoga if you have heart conditions, if you don't like the heat or being covered in your own sweat and other people's sweat very nearby. And if you don't like strict rules, because they are very strict about where you can look, about when you can drink water, about when you can and can't leave the room. So if those aren't your cup of tea, you probably want to steer away. To this day, Bikram yoga is probably one of the most strenuous workouts I've ever done in my life. But it's also, the flip side, when you finish a Bikram yoga class and during that Shavasana, it's the best feeling in the entire world. It's a lot more intense than sort of the high you get from some of the yoga classes that aren't heated. It's really, really awesome and amazing. You feel incredible after. And that's another one of my tips. If you're doing Bikram yoga, don't schedule to have to be somewhere else immediately right after the class. Usually Bikram yoga classes, they have half an hour or more in between classes. You feel so great during a Bikram Shavasana that you don't want to have to cut it short and rush somewhere. They usually say, you know, stay in the room as long as you want for your Shavasana, and you can kind of take as much time as you need. So don't schedule something, don't rush. Take that time and really enjoy that Bikram Shavasana and give yourself that extra time, because it's one of the best feelings in the world.